like a nice like intro of some sort. There's some clips of some sort to play, and then the show kicks off. Instead, I'm just going to tell you guys to listen to Lastelle's newest EP called Exist Volume 1. It is good. It is 21 minutes of excellence, especially if you're a fan of rock music, metal music, and all that stuff. Not sponsored, not being paid for it. Just I listened to the whole thing. I nearly died of crying and drowning, and then also laughed because it's great. But if you want to go for a nice emotion roller coaster too, Lastelle, Exist, Volume 1, their new EP came out like last week. So yeah. And that's that. Welcome to Silly Whales. I have to readjust my glasses after doing a sponsored, after doing a failed, not even a sponsored read, but it felt like I was doing a sponsored read anyway. This is a mental health podcast, and we discuss things that you may or may not want to hear. We discuss things like depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, all the things that will get you demonetized off of YouTube. But which is yet to happen to us, by the way, because no one cares about us. So this show, while it is for everyone, it might not be for you, and that is okay. That is A-okay. If you want to listen to something that's more upbeat, then there's quite a few different podcasts, but also I've been watching The Day to Day, which is a great show, old BBC-style show. I've been rewatching that if you like satire comedy. Anyway, yeah. How you doing, Joe? You alive?
Yeah, I'm alive. I didn't know we were getting monetized for any of this.
Well, we're not, but because I don't have monetization on the channel anymore, but we're not getting demonetized for it. That's effectively what I'm looking for. Nothing's getting flagged, nothing's getting removed, nothing's getting in any way, shape, or form censored.
Yeah, fair enough. But I'm good. How are you?
I'm alive, man. I'm alive. I'm a very, very tired individual at the moment.
A bit sleepy.
Yeah, like I'm not. I think I wish I was sleepy, but I'm not. I'm just. All of my things in a week, they're always back to back to back to back to back, and then there's like a couple of days of like still things going on, but it's slower, and then it's right back into the back to back to back to back to back. So it's like there's no actual confirmed time of break because every day has something in it. So it's like there's no time to like I can't spend the whole day doing nothing indoors. Like that's not a reality on any days of the week.
Well, it's very good for you, to be fair.
Yeah, it's good for me. But then I do wish that I could, like, after we record this, I have to get on a bike or get on the overground to go coach a football game. So I was like, I would love, once we finish recording this, like, we can play games or do something like that. But then no, I have to, like, skip town effectively and then come back and hope that yourself and Orchesters is still alive to play some sort of games. We're playing Core Keeper at the moment. That's what we're doing, folks.
Yeah, I've only played in like twice now because I initially wasn't in it and then I've been absent largely. But it's fun. It's all right. It's not bad. I enjoyed it.
I don't know what you call Core Keeper as a game because I feel like there's loads of Core Keeper type games. I don't know how to describe it. I feel like you're better at genrering video game titles. What is it?
Let me just go to Steam quickly.
You fraud.
No, I think off the top of my head, it's not really a survival game, right? Like it's kind of survival, but it's that kind of survival where it's like you do a couple things and then the survival part of it is not really relevant anymore. It's quite like it's survival in the light way, and but it's mostly about like setting up like an infrastructure so that you can go out and defeat bosses and get new resources to improve yourself. It's got a very like RPG element to that, which Valheim, it has similarities in the way that the actual gameplay loop is. Like, you know, in Valheim, it's literally the same. Like, you try to go out to get resources to improve like a kind of core infrastructure. that then means that we can be stronger, and then it then means we can go out to like bosses and defeat bosses to get stuff from them to improve ourselves, and so that we can be better and blah blah blah. So it's the exact same loop. I don't know what that's called.
It is a
From
1 to 8 player mining sandbox adventure.
Sure, I don't really think of it as a sandbox though, but
That's what it
feel
says
like
on the Steam page.
I know I'm looking at it like sandbox survival online. Like, is it sandbox really? Like, what's like?
I guess you can technically build whatever you want and do whatever you want to an extent.
I don't really know what the notion of sandbox means anymore. It is kind of a, I should say actually, to be fair, the mining part is kind of correct. It's got, and by mining we almost mean Minecraft-esque is what we're saying, like in the sense that it's not 3D, but it's made up of. I mean, technically, it does have a dimension up high, whatever. But you know what I mean? Like it's a top-down game,
It's a
and it's made up
top-down,
of squares.
pixel-based games. Cool as
Yeah,
fuck.
and it's made up
Give
of
it a play.
squares, so
Give it
it
a
does
play.
that. It was fun. I did enjoy it. And I do want to keep playing it. I want to. The problem with these kinds of games for me, and I mean, even Valheim has this to a degree, is that like there's the game shifts a lot of the time, like really, like quite a lot between sort of the infrastructure side and the fighting the boss side, and there's almost this element of me that only wants one of those things, like for a game. So that like I have one game in which I fight bosses, and then I have one game in which I'm just building up infrastructure and making a nice thing. And I almost just want those. Like Minecraft is actually the same way. When I did play it, I was like, I don't care about finding the dragon. Who gives a shit? I'm just making a house and making like a nice place to live and making a place with like traps for mobs and stuff. Like that was the idea for me, you know, was that sort of thing. And like, and also just playing with other people. To be fair, this being co-op makes a huge difference. I would never play the single player, I don't think. Just personally, I don't think I would.
Yeah. Like we do have a present episode in the pipeline about gaming and mental health, I think. I think it's written down the list of things to do. But yeah, like, as I said, I haven't released last week's episode yet. So as you're listening to this, last week's episode will probably be up maybe for like 2 or 3 days, and then this will come out. I've been very, as I said before, very busy with everything else, so editing episodes have been difficult. Like last week's episode, we went for nearly 2 hours, and one half was discussing random normal stuff, and then the second half was very much discussing like the idea of self-diagnosing in like terms of mental health conditions and things like that. So it's probably gonna be split. But in that first hour, I was speaking about mental health and Football Manager and like the dichotomy I was having and things like that. And it's like I was thinking about it more in depth this morning. I was like, wow, like, you know, this is what gaming can do to people, and this is what like it can have a really strong effect. And I also realized the negative effects as well. Like I was scrolling through Reddit and I saw like the new FIFA game is going to come out, EA Sports FC 25, and they have the Ultimate Team game mode, which is very much like at this point it's gambling, and you know, people have, you know, been committed as being gambling addicts from the game because a lot. It's like very. I believe the term is gacha based games where you're buying packs and things like that, hoping to get the best cards and things like that. Very like pay to win in an aspect as well, if you want it to be. And I hated what I saw people become because of how much they played the game, and I hated what I became because the game felt like a chore to play because it was so poor. But I wanted to get the best players. I had to play a game mode that was so boring, like 15 times, score this, and you're just a bit like, I will find myself, you know, and you know me, like, anger is a problem in which, like, I'm super cool and chilled out. So if I'm being like easily irritated by something to the point where I'm like, fuck, that's a problem. That game would do that. So I was like, nah. And every single year it would do that. And then this year, I stopped playing the game at the earliest point I've ever stopped playing FIFA. I quit
Nice.
literally before the new year, I think, is when I stopped playing it. And I only went back to it every now and then. And then I stopped playing it completely, like late January. So it's like, cool. It's not good for your mental health. It's not good for you. And I stopped playing it. The new game is coming out and I want to give it a shot, you know. But then it just feels like a weird relationship you have with the game where it's like, hey, and nothing is certain. You might do really well in the game and win every game, but you still might get like the worst cards possible from a pack. Everything's a dice roll, and the dice roll is never in your favor. And even if it is, it will somehow be against you. So
for clarity, because you use the word gacha, which is a term that does exist, but it's like it's still somewhat gaming slang. Like for anyone who doesn't know that term, like if you've heard the term loot box before, then it's the idea of and you said like card packs. It's like opening a thing that you know has like a certain list of potential things that can come out of it, and you don't know what's gonna appear. But there's like rarities of different things that have different probabilities. So it's all very probabilistic. It's recognized in European countries as being equivalent to gambling in most cases because of the nature of the value of these things and the fact that it's money and it's in for random things. And what Alex was describing in terms of the grind being really annoying is part of the process by which they get you to want to get these things, but they also make the challenge of doing so without paying very annoying and difficult. And then you end up spending money, and it's just like any story. Like mobile games have this a lot as well, but and microtransactions in general in games exist for this kind of thing. And if you've ever heard any horror stories about a kid like ordering like I don't know, like paying for like £1,000 worth of stuff on their on with their parents' card on the iPad, which honestly, like fucking work your shit out. Don't let your kid like your kid playing on the iPad, sure, whatever. Like I'm not going to judge you straight up, but like the card stuff, like get that card shit off your iPad if your kid's using it, because that's such a bad. Don't do it. So yeah, like all those horror stories come from literally that. Because if you're a kid, like you follow where it goes, and it's not your money. You don't know what the value is, so who cares? But yeah, it's not great, and definitely I think the model that they have for is it called Dream Team? Is that what it's called in FIFA?
Ultimate Team.
Ultimate Team. Okay, so in my head it was Dream Team because you're like constructing a dream team, but I don't know if that was always if that's just something I kind of made up in my head. But yeah, it's like it's you're making your big, you've got your 11 people and they've got chemistry between each other, and there's all of these stats and stuff, and you're trying to get the legendaries and things like that.
I like how little you know, but also how much you know at the same time.
I don't need to know much because I know the concept of these kinds of things so well.
That's what I'm pointing out. Like you don't need to really have a skill of knowledge here. You just have to have a general concept of how this system works in order to effectively get it bang on its head.
I also know far more about games than I should, considering how much I play games. Like I know because YouTube, and I watch a lot of gaming YouTube because the personalities I grew up with was gaming YouTube side, not like the like not any other sort of YouTube, if you know what I mean. Like I think nowadays I like vlogs quite a lot, but I rarely watch vlogs. It's only like the people whose personalities I like previously in their vlogs, which they rarely do. I don't think I would ever watch a vlog channel specifically, but I do like sometimes watching like nature stuff. So that's kind of where, yeah. But anyway, enough said about that. I agree with you though. Again, not to get too talky about all this stuff, but like is gaming innately bad or not? No, so much of the stuff isn't innately bad. Like GMO, in my opinion, genetically modified organisms are not innately bad. It's more a case of how do companies exploit GMO crops for the purposes of profit versus the purposes of humanitarian aid or otherwise. And there are issues with GMO crops, to be fair, if you're thinking about biodiversity and stuff like that. But in theory, you could put research into creating different variants that actually were still genetically different enough, but had these things but still had these benefits in certain ways. It's a whole thing. I'm not going to get too much into it, but that's an example of something that exists in real life where it's like GMO crops are incredible, when in fact we've done it we've done that version of it. We've done GMO crops stuff for literally all of ancient history, including domestication of animals. GMO animals technically exist, but the how would you say? But the difference is just merely like the level of control we could have over it. Or for example, it's possible to have like rice, which has, I think it's called golden rice, where it's rice that essentially is naturally, like the plant naturally builds up and injects it with, I think it's vitamin A, because it's in India. There are lots of areas where vitamin A is incredibly is severely limited, and so you have like, I think it's vitamin A. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it is because it's a carrot. Vitamin A is like from carotenoids, which is like carrots, which is why carrots have it. But the point is that it's very very uh, useful and incredibly, and the idea that like it could then save many many people's lives means obviously it's important. But then you want to make sure that it's done in such a way where there is like a company being able to kind of lord it over and get and exploit like communities or otherwise in order to have this crop, and things like that. Or you wouldn't want to make the crop so that the people have to buy it from the producer rather than being able to plant it themselves. You know what I mean? Like it's that sort
Yeah.
of relationship you want to avoid. But yeah, like gaming is very, I mean, again, like so many things, gaming is very similar. Where the saddest realities of gaming and even people and of people who game are like, is can kind of sometimes overshadow the positive stuff that game can provide. Even for someone like me who knows so much about gaming, I very regularly am cynical about gaming. So whatever, it's a
Yeah.
thing.
Like I'm always like, I think we're in an age now where it's at its easiest to manipulate and affect a market and affect a demographic. So they know what works and they know how it works. So when games fail, you kind of look at it and go, well, what did you guys not do? Like there's a game called Concord. I don't know if you heard anything about it, Joe.
I've heard the name.
Yeah, pretty much is like a hero shooter, like similar to a game like Overwatch, where yeah, you have your heroes and they shoot things, and yeah, it's great. And they put the game out to play. It wasn't free to play; you had to pay for it, and it had like 12 players, and it was meant to be like a massive release. It's a multi-million-dollar thing by Sony, and it completely flopped, completely died, crashed and burned, and it got taken offline like earlier last week. We're recording this on the 17th. I think it got taken off like on the 12th, something like that. It was bad. And like this episode will be coming out before the 20th, I think, of September. So it's like, it was bad. It was a crash and burn. So you go, damn, Sony knows how to like dictate what their markets want and they know how to get an audience. But sometimes they fall so flat and it's embarrassing. And it's just like, this is insane. But then you look at games like, a Fortnite, and you look at games like a FIFA, and their whole purpose is like, we are going to make you spend money every single time. Like the core part of the game, for the most part, in Fortnite's case, is free. But we're looking to get money from you either by advertising things to you or by making you want to buy like a battle pass or buy cosmetics or buy in EA's case, buying points to spend on cards, buying V-Bucks and things like that. And it's like they know. So they have a loop and it works every single time. And I was thinking, wow, we are at our most vulnerable to like the effects of consumerism, but also like that fear of missing out because of how connected we are in society. So we can now be envious of somebody in a different country because they have something that we didn't get in a game. So we have to go, oh, I should get it. Like, oh, I need this skin and everyone has this skin. So I need to get like Call of Duty points to get this skin. And it's like, damn. I realize, wow, that is the gaming mental health thing is a big, it might make it like our first like feature production style thing where we like make a YouTube video style thing where it can be listened to, but there's like a video behind it as well. Like purely because of how manipulative the industry is. But yeah, like that's the whole thing. In other news, Arsenal won the North London derby 1-0. Football's back. And I just found, from like removing football from it, on my way to training on Saturday, I saw maybe one Arsenal shirt on my way there, and I went through Islington, went through Camden, and
Really?
at training, I saw like nothing. Like the usual kids with their Arsenal shirts on, sure, but nothing. Nothing out of the ordinary anyway. Sunday, the day of the game, I saw like 8, 9, 10. Cool. Good numbers. But again, nothing out of the ordinary. Monday, though. Monday. Not a bank holiday, just Monday. Every motherfucker had their Arsenal shirt on. Because we were lame. Okay? We were in the bragging rights mode. North London was very much ours. So it was like, yeah, we're here to ball out. All of us are, including me. Like, it's crazy how we brag from safe distances.
So wait, this is just describe to me, when was the actual game though? The game was
Sunday.
on Sunday. Okay. So yeah, that was the aftermath of that is, hey, everyone,
Where
let's put our
I saw like
Arsenal
30
tees on.
plus Arsenal shirts, you know. Every lad in the Monday morning heat with their Arsenal shirts, all the girls with their Arsenal shirts wrapped up like a crop top, you know, oh look at me. Like everyone had an Arsenal shirt on. You know, the lads in their like far too small cargo shorts, like walking down the road. Like, nah, like if we had lost the game, would you have still worn your shirt? And the only person who I know who would have done it, because he did, is my good friend Ben, because he showed up to football on Monday in his Tottenham tracksuit top. I was like, yeah, that's a good man right there, even though you support the wrong team. But you know, again, I don't hate Tottenham. I don't. I hate Chelsea.
But he can't be supporting the wrong team. If he was supporting the wrong team, then he would not be wearing Tottenham. Isn't that the point? He's wearing the right team because it's the team that he grew up with, or at least chose at a certain
That's the thing.
point.
I'm surrounded by Tottenham fans. All my close secondary school friends are Tottenham. So, in my opinion, I'm going to use the poster from Fargo and say everyone's right. What does it say? Something like, you know, all
I've
the
never
fish are
seen
going to
it.
the left. All the fish are going to the left, and I'm the fish is going to the right. And yeah, that I'm going to use that methodology and just be like, I am vindicated. Yeah. What if you're right and they are wrong? So you know, that's all I'm pointing out here. You know, nothing groundbreaking. I'm just having like a little moment where I can celebrate Arsenal winning a game, and it was good. And also, it was a very poignant scoreline of 1-0 to the Arsenal. It was, you can't get much better than this, you know.
I imagine my auntie's pretty pleased as well, like because she's actually quite a big football fan, and she's always been a big Arsenal fan. So, like, I tried, like, I saw her when we picked up my granddad's ashes and things like that. But I don't quite remember if we spoke about football. But I always know that she's always like about it. So I imagine she was quite pleased as well.
Yeah, it's like it's always like good. It's good to see people happy and walking around the streets of London in their Arsenal shirts. It's not a criticism at all. I just, again, like we don't really risk. We don't take many risks when it comes to bragging. But it was also like, I also love, again, what the sport can do in a very like abject sense. I think we discussed this last week.
We discussed this
About
a
like
while back, about like we did some football stuff, especially when it was around like the World. No, sorry, not the World Cup. The
the
European.
Euros.
Yeah, Euros. Yeah. We talked about a lot, like the kind of experience of like, you know, even as me as a bystander, like I can enjoy the sense of like the, you know, like collective experience of something and things like that, you know, and so on. I do I do always think though, like even you describing like seeing 30 people with Arsenal shirts, it's like there's a certain element to where I'm like, sure. And then there's a part of me in the back of my head that's like, Yeah, I would steer well clear. Not because I actually think there's anything wrong with it. There's nothing innately wrong with Arsenal fans, or there's nothing innately wrong with football fans. But it's one of those things where it's unfortunate the like stigma plus like actual reality of people who act fucking miserably when it comes to football and like in watching football and stuff. Not like in as just a celebratory way, but in like a like actively being kind of shitheads, you know? And that's unfortunate that those people exist. And it does give me an unfortunate feeling whenever I see football because like I can just appreciate football. I can. I can't appreciate as much as some people, but I can appreciate its existence. But like I but I struggle on occasion to like get with with lots of people who are like very much into football, which is why I find you so unique.
Yeah, like I feel like you connect best with when it comes to football anyway, with most things to do with football when you kind of can gauge the other person's interest in it. So I'm very much understanding of the fact that like in a lot of contexts I'm in, uh, I will be more interested in football than the person next to me. So I'm very like aware. So I'm trying my best not to overload people,
I
and
mean,
I
if you
kind of
didn't,
wait
you'd
for
be a
the
bad
in.
coach. You know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah,
if you weren't as
yes,
passionate, like it'd be a bad. It would be a bad look on you.
but you'll be surprised at how like people, how many people I know who are passionate about football, but not really passionate about like the coaching side of things either. So they're football coaches who aren't really passionate about actually coaching football. They just are passionate about the sport. And I think that's what happens to a lot of like
Mm.
new like of coaches. That they're happy with. They don't really want to coach people how to get to the level of the people they see on TV or how to get to a level that's higher than their original level. They want to just be a part of something successful. So they won't know like the intricacies surrounding it. And I'm here to tell you right now, at grassroots level, I'm very confident that 90% of like coaching and football is through mental, like mentalization, mental health conditioning, and communication. Like the tactics and all that stuff is good. If you can educate people on that really well, you're fantastic. You are an elite level coach, in my opinion. But 90% of it at grassroots level is just the mental process of it all. Like, how am I talking to this person? How am I communicating with this person? How do they communicate with me? How do I communicate to a team of people? How do I communicate to, I don't know, parents? How do I communicate to like people in and around that sphere and make a clear message that everyone can understand?
Mm.
That is an art form. And it's so difficult to master every single one of those things. And if you can, congratulations. But it's nigh and impossible to be a master of all these things. You might be good at all of them, but to master them all, oof, that is an art.
It's the art of teaching, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
fundamental. Yeah.
Even then, like, because it's more than, as a teacher, it's more than teaching because it kind of follows you. Like after a day at work, at school, I can be like, I never have to really think about uh like the interactions don't overlap in a way. Like, yes, you might think about, oh, I was a bit too hard on this kid in the classroom, but with football, because of how it's, in a way, it's slightly more, you need them to play to a level and they need you to get them to that level. So there's a reliance on it. With school, though, if a kid's not really performing well and they're not doing well, we blame the kid and only the kid. So,
But okay, well, that I already feel like you described just being a bad teacher, though. Like, and also when I was referring to teaching, I didn't mean I didn't mean the skill of teaching as in being a teacher at a school. I meant the ability to mentor, the ability
yeah,
to
yeah,
get
yeah.
people excited and interested. But I think what you're describing is an example of a bad teacher. They're
Well, that's
just
the thing.
like, oh, it's the
But that's
kid's
the thing.
fault.
Like teachers, like even in that way, like there's so many teachers who we had who were considered good teachers who, like at the end of the day, if they didn't get results out of us, it was down to our commitment to it. It was like it's down to us. Like teachers are, I don't feel like teachers are looked at results based if unless they're really, really, really bad. So people can fall through the cracks really easily. That's what I mean. Like it's not there's not, yeah, like pretty much that. Like I think the overlap is there, but I feel like there's a difference in it. I don't really know how to describe the difference in it.
I imagine there must be so many differences because of the institutions, if nothing else. But like it is, the feeling of mentorship, I think, is very much similar.
Yeah.
I think you could easily, like, especially if like a hardworking teacher, I think is struggling with the exact same problems that you're struggling with, which I know because you both have done something to that extent, and because we know teachers, both of us, like, in our lives, so we understand like the struggle. But it's yeah, I'm sure there are some differences, if nothing else, but because of the institution and because of the specific
Yeah.
study.
Like there's I think the reason why I'm making a case for this is because I've tried to use my teaching style in football coaching and it's not worked.
Yeah, but they're
So
different
yeah,
studies, right? So
yeah. I think that's why I'm really big difference, but there might not be. I mean, I might have to um and go from there because again, nothing's set in stone, so nothing's really like permanent. Like I have to do things this way. No, it's the opposite. I don't have to do anything in any way. Like everything can change. Everything is malleable. Can be twisted and conjured or whatever. You know, nothing is incorrigible and all that stuff. I don't know. We're here.
just a quick note, by the way, you started cutting out like at moments. I don't know if it's because you were turning your head away or if it's because you went too high in volume or something, but it started like up until this point, it hasn't been doing it, but it did it there. So I don't know if you want to make a note of that.
As I said, incorrigible. I think I literally looked directly at the screen and spoke directly at the laptop. So yeah.
Well, incorrigible, which I think is that meant to be incorrigible, because I don't know what the word incorrigible is.
I think it's actually incorrigible.
Okay, incorrigible has a meaning, but I don't know if it actually works. But I didn't know what the word incorrigible was, so I had to come up with something.
I'll do a quick spell check on that. And the reason why I use that word is because it came up yesterday, and it was just stuck in my head.
Oh, I'm the same.
Incorrigible. There we go.
Incorrigible. Yeah.
I don't think incorrigible is a word, and if it is, it's not spelled like that.
It didn't sound right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of passions, I have been. I actually wanted to talk about it last week, but we went on our tangents last week, and it was going on for so long. There was never any chance of me like pushing it in. I was. Sorry. Let me have headed together. Star Talk is a podcast that exists. I am embarrassed personally with what I'm about to talk about, because I have known about Star Talk for a very long time. I don't know how long it's been going on for, but Star Talk is a podcast, to be clear. Star Talk Wikipedia. Just quickly checking on how long it's been around for. It has been going on for since 2015. Okay.
Yeah.
2019. It's still going, I'm pretty sure. It's just yeah, there were certain seasons of it that was broadcast because it was a TV show, I think. And then it became a podcast after that, I think. Maybe I think that might have been what happened. I don't remember. But either way, it's become a podcast now. Yes, I'm pretty sure I'm getting all of this right. Because it was initially a talk show, a science themed late night talk show, but it's now a podcast. You can now list it as a podcast. Great. So it's been going on for a long time. So I'd heard about it years ago, and for whatever reason, as a fucking science nerd, it never. I decided, like, for whatever reason that I was at the time, I was like, I'm not going to listen to it. Like, I don't know if I would enjoy it. I don't know if it's like something that I would be that it's not that I thought I wouldn't be interested in, but I was like, mate, like, I don't know. There's something, like, I don't know what I got from it. I don't know what it was. I don't know what my level of disdain and my life was at the time that I thought I wouldn't enjoy it. And I've been listening to it. I've listened to more recent episodes, so going back, I'm trying to go back through a catalog, and holy crap, is it amazing! Like, so to explain, it's Neil now. What I'm listening to is uh, generally always Neil deGrasse Tyson and Chuck Nice, Lord Chuck Nice, um, and obviously it's Professor Neil deGrasse Tyson and Lord Chuck Nice, and it's Neil deGrasse Tyson is a obviously astrophysicist and very well known, um, quite a pop culture within popular culture, and Lord Chuck Nice is a comedian who has an incredible interest in this stuff, and it actually shocks me how much he keeps up with the actual stuff they're talking about. Like they're talking about stuff, and he. I don't know what level he was when they started the podcast. They obviously they have a relationship outside of it. So they knew each other for a while, but I don't know what Chuck Knight's like actual like true understanding was before the podcast started, and then slowly over time of him being on the podcast and all of that, and obviously talking to Tyson more and more and more, Neil I guess I should say, Neil more and more and more, that like you end up with this, like he ends up having this repository of knowledge that's well beyond like what a normal person would have. And yeah, he's still stunned and excited by things and so on in the way that I would be. But there's stuff where I'm like, oh shit, like he got that and I didn't get that. Hold on, what did he say? Like, because when you get to the certain levels of physics, it stops being intuitive and it stops being in that space where you can be like, oh, okay, I like I know, like I don't. I'm trying to think how to explain this. Like an engineer, for example, could like look at a piece of equipment. This is like getting into Newtonian physics, but like if you look at a piece of equipment, you can be like, oh, okay, so if I put the blocks like this or the blocks like this, which one is more stable? And you might intuit the answer, or the answer might be unintuitive. But either way, once you know the reason, because it's Newtonian physics and it all kind of mathematically makes sense. And sometimes it's just a case of you think something and you think that should be more stable, and then it's actually the other way, and you're like, why would that be more stable? And then there's a reason given, and you're like, oh, okay, so that's like a special rule for this situation, but I know now. It's like I get it, I get the rule. Some bits of physics is like eventually gets to the point, and this is where you get into like quantum mechanics and things like that. There's just aspects of physics where it's like, yeah, like an electron like doesn't all things are waves, and like a particle is just a bump in the wave, and the universe is essentially just a singular like plane with just bumps of waves in it, and there's nothing more than that. And it's like, what the fuck are we talking about? Like, like it just gets into unfathomable like complicate complexity, um which is actually which actually starts to border on the ideas of magic. Like it starts to feel like you're talking about magic rather than science, which is great because there's a very famous quote which is about science at a certain level of technology, like certain levels of technology will look like magic to those who don't understand it or haven't experienced it. You know, so you just get this huge feeling that you're looking at something that doesn't make sense. It feels like magic. It feels almost like ethereal, and it's not. It's just it's the way that the universe works. It's just the way the universe works at such a small scale that we can't that the intuitions that work at the scale that we think of, which is more Newtonian physics, doesn't work anyway. So stuff like this, which I don't know about very well, or don't know quite the full extent of, the kind of things that I would learn if I finished my physics degree, uh, which I really wish I knew about. And if I wish I knew that I needed a maths degree to do physics. It seems crazy to me thinking now, but I genuinely didn't know that you had to do maths at A level to do physics, to do a physics degree. So I was unfortunately hamstringed very early on. Like literally, if you don't know any physics, but you know mathematics, you're better off doing physics as a degree, not knowing any physics, doing no physics at A level and doing just maths at A level. Like it's better, it's easier, and fundamentally makes more sense because physics is more intuitive. than the actual like laws of mathematics, which can be quite quickly, like when you get to A level, not necessarily the most intuitive all the time. Anyway, so there's lots of stuff that's a gaps in my knowledge that I really enjoy, but also there's this like I think I talked about before, like this sense of when like how wonderful it is to learn science and stuff because you begin to fabricate an understanding of the world that actually works when you can poke at it in one area and you experience the ripple going out everywhere else. So you never feel like you're being hoodwinked or the idea that you're learning a piece of information and someone's just going to turn around later and say, oh, none of that's true. Like, don't get me wrong, stuff at the frontier of scientific understanding can be like that. And there's also lots of hypotheses that are not necessarily, these aren't theories. These are not necessarily like, is string theory a theory? The use of colloquial notion of it and the actual use of it in science actually blurs a little bit there. But the idea is essentially that, not everything is absolutely certain. And generally speaking, we're always working with best estimates. But the thing is that some of these best estimates are constantly seem to be true every time you check it, right? So it's wonderful because it gives you a very it allows me to breathe as a person because whether it's an over need a need for control or something like that, I don't know, but it's that feeling of like understanding the nature of the universe makes me feel better because I understand the universe, which means I have a better understanding to make further decisions and further ideas and further abstractions about everything. So really cool. Also, it also gives you a more it gives you the feeling of an authority that is probably a lot more that is a lot more authoritative than like some things, like some random podcaster, for example. Um, you know, it's very cool. Beyond that, though, it's just fascinating, and I think it's one of those things where like I've been thinking about this so much that the one thing about science and mathematics at school, which I loved all of it, but I loved it because I loved it like in the way that you like puzzles, right? um, and in the way that like lots of things are very interesting to learn about. But I feel like one of the key things that these subjects lacked was the uh, was the amount to which you took something and then actually like attached it to a real existing thing. Like mathematics, I think has the biggest issue with this because I feel like so much of the time when we learned maths, there really wasn't a good explanation as to why you would need it. Like certain stuff, like early on, was very intuitive. Like knowing how to count things is quite naturally useful. Money is a very useful thing, right? Like understanding money makes sense. Even understanding time, even though it's like a stupid system in the sense that it's not metric and it's kind of funky, sure, but you can get it, right? But trying to understand certain things doesn't feel like it means anything. But if you say, hey, there's this, like, here's something that's really cool. Like, we're going to try and land a spaceship, or we're going to try and figure out how much fuel we need to get out into space. And these are the kinds of things you have to think about. And getting like, and like I can imagine like a really cool scenario where you have a bunch of different things that you're trying to teach students, and you get like a classroom to basically be Houston. Like you try and get them to be NASA. Like setting up doing the calculations to try and figure out how much fuel it will take to get rocket into space and things like that. Like I think there's some really cool like role play stuff in this area where it's like you can really get people to be super excited or think about these things, or at least think like, oh, at least find something that's really cool that they like and go, okay, here's like an example of the mathematics used in it and why it's so, and why you need to know this, this, and this. Not only just because I think it actually just makes it better, like learning wise, it's easier for people to remember these things, but also just because if you want to get people into STEM, or if at the very least you just want to get people to appreciate mathematics and science for the rest of their lives, this is a pretty good way of doing it. Like it just seems and it's somewhat surprising to me that it feels like it's not involved within. Well, okay, I want to be clear. It's the fact that it's not involved in curriculum is what I'm upset about. teachers obviously have a hard enough time as it is. I would love any teacher who is able to slip in these kinds of things, but I know that obviously they're limited, and also that it's not always that easy, and you need a lot of support sometimes for these things, and also it takes a lot of work outside of your work to do this. It's it's a very intensive thing to ask of teachers, but it's one of those things that like ultimately puts you in that position, though, almost like we were talking about, where you go from being like an average teacher to an incredible teacher, and it makes a huge difference. And even if it doesn't help everyone in the class, like if it helps like 5 of them, it could make huge strides for them in person, like in their personal growth or whatever. So I don't know, there's stuff like that.
Wait, what's an example of that though?
What do you mean? Sorry.
So you said like, trying to remember, like we said about like teachers integrating that into their style of teaching, or is it the learning process? Like, what would make it better? If that makes sense.
What for the child would make the experience better?
Yeah. Like, what's an example of it?
Well, I gave an example with the idea of sending a rocket into space, for example, or like trying to imagine, like basically, how they have like model UNs, but basically
Yeah.
having like the class feel like they're on a group project of being like NASA, and getting them all to like work out different things. And especially because there's a lot of scientific history, you actually could model this like in a classroom, and you could actually have like different groups doing slightly different things and
So you could
coming up.
so you could like craft a project, and like similar to like in Civ, where you put all your cities to work on the international games.
Sure. Yes. Yes.
Um,
Much like that.
So like you could create like a project. I guess you could do it in, I can only see like with ICT, for example, maybe you could get like, okay, we need to now make a game. So
Yeah.
one group of you guys will be on coding, the other group is going to be on design, and which all these things require use of like ICT skills. And
Well,
like,
I think probably everyone would have to do coding at some level, but like
yeah,
I think you could like distribute what you're coding for, like what
yeah,
kinds of things you're coding for. Yeah.
like things like that. So I guess with mathematics, you could do it similarly in like one group is doing like measuring the dimensions of a project. They have to build something. The other group is I don't know, checking how, like, the stock of the things that they need and things like that. And then it's a collaborative effort to create something.
Yeah, because that's what happened in real life. I mean, that is exactly what happened, and you can make a more minute version within the limits of what you can teach. Like, obviously, I think the example of the NASA thing is more difficult because depending on what you taught kids, you have, like, in terms of what the curriculum tells you to teach them, they might not have enough fundamentally to work with to do something like that. But there's no shot that you couldn't, like, come up with or find like an example. Like the problem is I don't have like a curriculum in front of me. If I knew what kids would learn, I'm like I can imagine making like per term there's like or maybe like twice per year or something there is a kind of like group style project involving the stuff they'll be learning in that term slash half year,
Yeah,
right?
well, I'm sure like there's things in the curriculum which you have to teach. It's about how you teach them. Like remember how we both did Of Mice and Men, and
Yeah.
we both did Shakespeare. So a lot of the time, like one of the methods for it is to have us act out like a Shakespeare play in a way. I will start by reading it, just reading it like we are reading a book, and then we'll start reading it in as characters. So like one person will be assigned Banquo or whatever the fuck his name is. The other
Yeah,
will
no,
be
you got it correct.
like yeah, all them people.
Cambium. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you could do that with like mathematics as well, in that you simplify it and then you add progressions to it as they understand it. I guess you can scale anything down for kids. That's the well for anyone really. Like they do functional maths for adults. Like I was trying to find stats on the country's mathematical level. One says that we are like, but we've dropped our levels of mathematics like as a country, like our ability with maths. And then another source have said that we have like done better than most countries. So maybe it's a difference in statistics. Overall, though, I would say like there's nothing attractive about how maths works. So it's very difficult to get people engaged in maths, especially with how it's taught. So you often see people being like, oh, I don't need to know like what the like Pythagoras theory is or things like that. I don't need to know like what's an acute angle or what's an obtuse angle. And then like 9 times out of 10, they actually do. Maybe not Pythagoras theory, but they need to know like angles and measurements and things like that, especially when they go into things like construction, where things have to be very precise. I've noticed that. So there's never that correlation between the practicality of mathematics, I've noticed.
That's kind of my point, I guess. Like, I think, I mean, we did D&T, for example, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't quite do D&T because we did like, it was a mixture of, you either did, I don't even think, we didn't even do it by rotation. We kind of just got assigned randomly, like D&T, graphics, food technology, and textiles. Was that the four, I think?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
that
so.
would just like I feel like I did graphics once, for example, in the 5 years at school, even though, or not 5 years, I guess, because I didn't do it at GCSE, but in the 3 years of Key Stage 3, I only did graphics for one term, I think. I definitely had done textiles more than that, and food tech more than that. D&T I remember doing kind of. Like we definitely did it. I think we did it twice, I think. Like I struggled to remember these very well, but like graphics I barely did, right? Even though graphics was by far the most interesting one when I did it at the time, I really enjoyed the like I think I easily, if I'd done more graphics, I might have been much more interested in doing something like architecture, for example. I really could have seen myself maybe being like that because there is a very mathematical edge to it. But for example, like a few of those, they're naturally quite practical, and things like D&T and graphics both have a designation in relationship with maths, where it's like you could easily have like teachers across, like obviously in secondary school, teachers across, from each other being like, doing a sort of thing like, hey, like in secondary school, it would be difficult. Don't get me wrong, but I can imagine like a situation where, um, a teacher in their class, it's like, oh, imagine you were making this for this, and you were talking to the teacher about it, and you just said, is there something you could make that's like really easy that they could spend like two lessons on or something, and they were just working out, and all it is just like making this thing and you can work out like you can use Pythagoras' theorem in it, and you need to use it in order to work out structurally or to at least explain its usefulness, right? And you can explain that in your class and just have them like do it, or literally like I don't know. There are definitely complications there when it comes to interdisciplinary stuff because obviously both teachers are working hard. But I imagine like even within a maths class, there are ways in which you can bring like a very basic form of that, or you could I mean, there's a book I read, and I don't remember what it's called. Unfortunately, it's a little green book, but I don't have it on me, and it was in my dad's office, so I don't remember so I have no idea what it's actually called. But it was a book about like child development and specifically about in schools, and there was a whole. It went through a whole example of a case study project involved talking about like essentially the colonization of Africa and the and and uh and the slave trade and people and places in Africa, and having this like thing where there were groups of people, groups of kids who were acting as different countries, and they were given like different motives and things like that, and basically showing the history through an example, and they were allowed to like go talk to other these other groups of like in diplomatic ways and all this stuff to try and like essentially do what the countries did, right? In this very like trying to give like a full notion of the idea of the history and of what actually happened in the real world, and with the idea that these kids are having an idea about what they think would have happened, right? With these ideas of like the money that you make, where you finding your profit, what you want, what your power state is. Like, obviously, I'm not saying any of this to say it's easy, but it's just a good example, and that was an example that I thought of, right? but it's a good example of like the kind of thing that could give you a very full understanding of like why this kind of shit happens in history. And it also was one in which, it recognized like all of the different players at play rather than just focusing on one element of it or being too reductionist as history can sometimes be when taught, right? Keep in mind also, I should say, primary school history was fucking awful from what I remember. Was that the same for you? Because it was like pretty bad from my memory.
History like last year, which is sad because we had Mr. Bennett, who was a great teacher. But like the issue of the curriculum, and it is changing now, is I said it before on the show, I think, maybe 2 weeks at a push for like civil rights movement, and it's sort of the same people, same noteworthy individuals. But we spend a lot of time on, the Vikings and things like that. Now, it's not to say we have to take away the Vikings to give more power and more lessons about civil rights. No, it's about what we're actually teaching and the content that we're teaching. Like, it's very much a Malcolm X was militant and Martin Luther King was, peaceful. And it's a lazy framing of one, what happened, two,
really
the relations
lazy.
that went down, and three, the nuance of discussions that took place, and the fact that, it's fair to say that MLK wasn't opposed to not violence, but more militant actions. So it's like the way it's taught is to very much paint one side of the civil rights part of MLK and Malcolm X as a good side, and Malcolm X is the bad side. They rarely ever mention what the Black Panthers actually stood for, and we rarely ever went into the like Huey P. Newton, for example, and then we don't discuss at all Black British history either. So there's very little. There's very little when kids say, "I don't need history." It's the one thing where I go, yeah, you definitely do, but you're not going to learn it at a strong level until you leave secondary school. Because these are things that you'll probably just learn anyway, because, this was always spoken about in horrible histories, or like you come across an adaptation of something on a show of some sort. These are things that are always there, but we don't actually learn the intricate details unnoticed of history. Like World War II, for example. I love teaching about World War II because there's so many little stories that you can pick from. Like the idea is that, this war started because Germany invades this place here. And then if you wanted to, you can go, in your opinion, what started it? Because was it Germany's invasion, or was it, the general fear of what could happen in this part of the world? And then you can give them branching stories to pick from. And like, was it like a pressure from, like, what caused the downfall of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany? Was it, Hitler's inability to control his own ego and him taking over from generals when they're winning the war and him bottling it completely because he's a shit leader? Or was it to do with more a resource issue and the inability to use the resource that it had available? Like, was the fall of Nazi Germany caused by Nazi Germany, or was it caused by the Allies? And you can have discussions and pull things together with this stuff, but just because of how branching it is. It's like, so many different stories. Or you can dig into the minutiae of just the Allies' role and Britain's role in this. You can go into like individual soldiers and generals and roles they played, the first black soldiers and generals. You can do any of these things, and there's so much to do, and we did, and we do. But for some reason, we only go very surface level with slavery, Black history, any ethnic minorities history. Really, is very much this happened, it was good. This happened, it was bad, and that's it. Have fun. But
I feel like all subjects are technically watered down. I do feel history ends up feeling like that a lot, especially when I learn stuff. By the way, I never learned about Vikings in history. I don't think I ever did. I learned about it from horrible histories, but I never learned it in history.
I learned it in primary school. We did so long on it.
I don't think we ever did a single thing on the Vikings, really, like beyond that they existed.
We did Vikings, we did the
I learned so little about
Tudors.
them. The Tudors, we did too many years. We did, I think we did like 3 years on the Tudors. I don't fucking understand it. Also, not the Tudors, specifically just King Henry VIII. Like, that's it, basically. And I guess a tiny bit of Mary and a tiny bit of Elizabeth, but honestly, really not that much. But we talked about this before, I think. But the thing I will say, like, and I think maybe that there's an element of this that is why I like maths and science so much, which is, and I will get to these examples. Apart from very few examples, you're never lied to in those subjects. Like, you can frame a lot of the stuff that comes up in subjects in a particular way, right? Like, it's very difficult to, like, you can frame historical events in very watered down ways that gives you a detail, like, that seems to suggest one thing, but it's actually way more complicated than that. Geography, I think, also can have this, although I think only in certain parts of geography, less like economic and social geography and more like physical geography. It's fine. It's like, okay. But economic and social can kind of be like messed about with. Um, if you think of like English can be as well, like interpretations or what you choose to represent in relationship to a book, or the kind of questions you ask in relation to a text is a big deal, because those are the most important things. Or asking even students to ask what the questions should be, kind of not allowing them to do that can kind of mean that you give them a certain angle. Science and mathematics is not like that. There's a purity to them at a certain degree. The problem is that they're watered down in a different way, which is that they're watered down by not having any practical application. Like, here's an incredible thing, right? The Greeks learned, like the ancient Greeks, because they were a big part in mathematics. They were definitely not the only ones, because they didn't have fucking zero. That came from India. But like, there were lots of things they didn't have. But there's some of the things that they had, like especially around geometry and stuff, was stuff that they essentially proved without even like actually measuring. Like, they proved through actual mathematics something that they didn't even have to measure. They didn't like find out a thing and then go, oh, what's the relationship? They worked out the relationships first, and then were like, oh yeah, it works. Like, this is how a circle works. This is how a triangle works. They learned about all these things. It's actually incredible that they were able to make these things, which is why, in ancient Greece, they worked out that the Earth was like, had roughly the circumference it does. They were off like by an amount, but not by a huge. They were off by like 3,000 kilometers, and they knew that the Earth wasn't flat. Like, they literally worked out the fucking size of the Earth at a very specific, like, at that time it seems inconsiderable, but they had no way of measuring. They just worked it out because they worked out. I think they knew about the measurement between two cities with wells, and they measured based on the well and where the light was as it fell into it, and as the sun like was in one place, what was it? They measured something in one place and another, and then they literally worked out the rest of it based on geometry they already understood. That's insane. That's incredible. That's the kind of thing that I wish was more involved in the actual teaching of mathematics, because it feels like sometimes mathematics gets abstract very quickly without any actual like explanation of like certain elements of it. And also a lot of it is just reinforcement, right? Like, oh, I want to teach you, you know, oh, I need to teach you about like, I need to teach you to add big numbers together and multiply bigger numbers together. We already know you know how to multiply. This is just you learning it by rote, because there's a whole thing about, apparently there's a whole thing that you have to kind of memorize it and be very, very good at it, but which I don't agree with personally. As a person who did maths and was very good at maths at that level, I disagree that you need to be that good. I would rather have learned more things in a more practical way and actually learn better than learning that thing and focusing on it so much. And it's funny because when I listen sometimes to like the way that they teach maths in America or in other places, the actual recognition that there is a difference in the curriculum comes forward sometimes, because there's things I realize that we don't get taught in the UK that they actually get taught in the US, which is pretty rare that I get to say that there's something about the US that seems better than the UK at some level. But it actually shocked me how many people seem to know, at whatever level, seem to know like something about mathematics that is actually not that commonly taught in the UK. I couldn't give you an example right now. And then science is, largely speaking, it's quite easy to relate it to something physical or objective. But the big thing with science is that, like, on occasion, and this is the funny thing, which once you learn this sort of thing, it's really quite funny. But there are occasions where, there's part of me that doesn't know why they do this, but there's a part of me that does, because I'm sure that they worked out that it is difficult. There are times in science where they lie to you about how something works because it's because everything will work the same for what you need to know, but there's actually way more information about it than you ever thought before. Like the way electrons work in atoms, which you learn in like chemistry and stuff like that, completely, like, everything you learn about in like GCSE is absolutely false. There's just like there's bits of it like, oh, each shell has like 8 electrons or something, which isn't actually true now that I think about it. In fact, obviously they don't describe shells, so they describe orbits. Yeah, like, you have like an orbit, and then you have another orbit, and they're like, oh yeah, there's like, this many or whatever, and they try to give an explanation. That's all bullshit. That's not true. That's not how electrons work. You also get taught that electrons seem like particles. They're not like particles whatsoever. Nothing like that. Not in the way that you would think of them. They don't orbit either. Like every diagram you've ever seen of something orbiting the nucleus, that's not an electron. They don't do that. That's not how they work. They work in probability clouds, bullshit like this, which is actually like just hilarious to me. But it's the only way I can think of science being that kind of watered down thing. But I understand it there because you're just trying to get concepts across. And maybe the idea of a probability cloud becomes a bit difficult to explain to a young kid. But I don't know. Maybe if you just taught them that, they would work it out. But I imagine at the end of the day, I probably am someone who should be a bit careful because I am quite good at understanding these things and I was good growing up with it. And I should recognize that not every kid is going to be as interested or as maybe likely to pick it up as I was. So I should be a bit more careful in my judgment about these things. But I do definitely think that subjects lack something. And I think genuinely, and my dad agrees with this, by the way, because we've talked about it before, the practical side of education, I think, is something that's weird because the delineation between practical work and education has never historically been separated the way that it is now, like they're truly quite separated as ideas, but it doesn't really make sense to do that because for the same reason that we kind of are saddened by the fact that we feel like we don't get taught about how to actually like look after ourselves when we leave home and things like that. Like there's certain things that we're not disciplined in or taught about, which, the school kind of expects parents to do, or the school expects like the rest of the world to do, even though the rest of the world expects the school to do it. So it's very, there's just this weird like relationship, I think, with all of this. And I do wish that there was more of a practical side. It's always why I actually was kind of jealous of BTech people, because I did sports BTech and I enjoyed sports BTech a lot. I did it in year 9. It was great. Got a distinction star. It's amazing. But like it was so fun. It was a project. It was a whole year. It was the whole year while I was doing it. It was like a long project where we kept adding stuff to it and I kept learning more things and it was really fascinating. And we did lots of like interesting, like practical work. And if the rest of my studies had been much more like that, I would have been so much more into like not only like certain subjects, but I think I would have learned a lot of things that would have made me a better student and probably actively made me a better person because it disciplines me in a certain way that I never got disciplined in by just, with the normal way that school was kind of run, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Was that P? So you did PE BTech?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I did What did I
Oh no,
do?
sorry, PE theory. I should be clear. PE theory BTEC.
Yeah, because that's what it's so silly. That's the thing. I really enjoy, of course, because you're learning about how things work and why things work, and there's a scientific aspect to it all as well.
Mm.
So it's like, again, similar to like mathematics. You can't really lie. What I didn't like about it is it kind of felt like it depends on the teacher you got, because sometimes it would just be like, we're doing a sport and we're going to learn about the sport, but we're not learning how to play the sport. So we're just kind of going through it. But like for example, with rugby, all you have to do, you get the ball and you take it over there. But why am I doing that? Like, give me the theories behind it. Give me an example of like what makes a rugby player a skillful rugby player. Like, what makes a skillful rugby player? Like, what are the characteristics of a rugby player? I wish I'd learned more of that stuff when I was going through school, rather than like skim reading a lot of it. But again, that comes down to how.
Oh, you cut off a lot there, just at the end
Where?
there.
Oh, I was saying
You said it
that
comes down to a lot.
it comes down to how little time we.
Oh, you're cutting off still. It doesn't matter. How little time you have to actually complete it, I'm guessing is what you were saying.
Yeah, like it's a lot to put into a curriculum.
I honestly found it so like my P theory specifically, I found to be it felt so relaxing in a way, because it felt like in the sense that I felt like I was learning a lot, but we were actively working on it's probably also a good thing if you're like neurodivergent, like in the sense that it's quite good at giving you like checklist things to do, and like and feel pride in the thing that like it gives you tasks basically, like because we would constantly do stuff throughout the entire year and like add it to a folder that became our folder that we gave in at the end as like, this is the work I've done for this year. It felt very satisfying in that way.
Yeah, like I think that's what I really. I think I wish things were more coursework based. Like I wish
Yeah, in
everything could
general.
be more
Yeah.
coursework based. Um,
I know not everyone likes it, to be clear, but I just think that if we were doing it at a younger age, I think it would feel more natural. And I also think that it does improve. I think my personal feeling is that the actual study itself is better. It's not to say that it's not to say that like you're going to learn. It's not to say that the exam is bad, like as in you're not going to learn anything. But if you're comparing one to one, I think that the actual experience of having to apply your work consistently throughout the year means that you are, and having to do so without the stress of an exam, but more like, you're consistently applying yourself, naturally will give you better results. And I think it's
yeah,
more satisfying in the end, which I think is better for mental health, especially considering what exams are like. So I'm all about coursework style over the exam now.
yeah. I think the reality is this: we need to look at our systems and look at our education system, and look at about whether how long can we keep this charade going of every kid can learn the same. Uh, I think need to start giving more options, and being like, hey, you could either learn normally, like this is me making up an idea on the spot, like
Mhm.
teach the class how you would normally teach it, but give students a choice at the beginning of the year. You can either put in and give me like the 6 coursework pieces that you need, and you have the end of the year to do all of it, or at the end of the year you sit an exam, and you give them the choice. And there's like a deadline for which you have to commit to one of them. So you can start the year thinking, I'm going to just go do the exam. I can't bother do all the coursework. And then midway through, you go, the deadline's a week away. I'm terrible at exams. I need to switch to coursework. Like something like that, I think gives, and you teach the class the same way, because that way it's closer to university in a way, depending on the
Mhm.
degree you choose. Also, it helps people plan their days better, which means that if you know that in order to ace this exam, you need to just be in class and you need to revise a certain amount of times, then you can dedicate your life around that thing, school. With coursework, you can go, I know I need to be in class, pick up all the information I know. I can do my course at project pretty much alongside lessons, and then I don't need to revise. I just need to study to finish the coursework. So every single minute I'm putting into quote unquote revision is no longer revision, it's actually work towards my future. So for kids who are
Yes.
wired that way, it works. And then it's not really complicated because what we ended up doing was, oh, this kid's dumb, put him on the BTEC version. This kid's dumb, put him on this version. And like, in reality, odds are the kids just don't really learn the same way. So there's a struggle to connect with the work that they're being asked to do. Like, you're asking me to do homework. Why? Like, kids don't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh, homework, even for me, when I'm asked to do like a CPD course, I'm like, you're not going to mark it. Teachers never mark homework. Like, they just like tick it and go, this is good. Like, I've never had a teacher come up to me and be like, yeah, your homework was, like not good and da 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 da. I've never had that. I wish I did, because then I'll be more inclined to do it. But like, I want my work to mean something, But yeah, here
Yeah.
we are. Here we are.
Oh, I will say with the thing you mentioned, that I remember with PE theory that we used to, but that we would do work in class. Like we would have lessons out where we were just doing our coursework in school. So we didn't have to it wasn't like we were doing everything outside of school, if you know what I mean. Obviously that was a GCSE level, and we were doing it in year 9. So maybe they were more particular about doing that. But I think I must have done some outside of school, but I think a majority of it I did in school. Which again, if you can fit it in, I think it just makes more sense to do it that way, because I don't know, you just, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff I don't know about the way that education's taught, so I'm going to be talking out my arse at a certain point. But I do wish that I think it was a more consistent thing throughout the educational spectrum as well. I wish that there was a bit more, especially in Key Stage 2. I feel like you can push kids a bit in Key Stage 2 to be more practically and apply themselves that way. You're not necessarily asking more of them; you're just asking them to try doing stuff in a way that's a bit more, that will actually help, that will just help, that gives them more study towards that kind of thing, which means that you can then replicate that later. But either way,
Yeah. Like, as we wrap up, as I have to get going,
yeah.
I really enjoy just unlocking how people's minds work, including my
Mm-hmm.
own, because I do not know how my mind actually works. I do not know how I learn. I do not know the best methods for how I learn. I definitely do not know how to get me to retain information to the best of my ability. Like, for me, it's case in point. If you get me like to do a combo on pads or on a boxing bag, I struggle really badly. Like, if you say, okay, just do a 1-3-2, which is, jab,
Oh.
well, yeah, jab. See, even now I'm struggling. Jab, hook, and then throw the cross straight away. I can get that. I can get that 9 times out of 10. You say for a 1-2, slip a punch, throw like a knee, and then a switch kick. I am fucked. Like, sequencing doesn't work. It just, yeah. Like, so combos as simple as like teep kick into like a low kick into a 1-2 knee push away teep kick. Fucked. Like, I have stages. I have to like ventilate in the corner. I even say hyperventilate. I just mean ventilate. Open a window. I like air myself out. I like, I have to like do a line of coke or some shit. Like, I don't know. It doesn't work. I would love to figure out a way to how to improve that, but that's a journey in itself. So like figuring that out, and if you can make that doing things for everyone where we actually support people in their learning rather than just like their learning. Does that make sense? I think the
Yeah,
world would be a somewhat better place. But who knows, eh?
sounds like it. I mean, hopefully. I think there are so many other issues as well. But we talk about this. I think we talk about this a lot. I think we repeat ourselves sometimes with this, but I think it's something that we just it highlights the fact that the fact that we talk about this highlights something. I think the fact that we talk about it so much.
But yeah.
All right, you got to go.
Any final closing?
Well, I was just going to say I've got to take my bike relatively soon, and you got to head off. So
yeah, Joe got a bike. He's like me now. Look at that.
Yeah, I got to get it repaired, but once it's done, then it's all good.
Guys, we're going to take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. If you've listened to us twice this week already, thank you, and I appreciate you endlessly. And also, before I finish the 2 steps to the rear thing, it's about to get cold soon. Summer's hanging on a little bit. It's sunny at the moment. It's about to get cold soon. And I know that people get really upset. Okay, I don't. I get happier. But I know a lot of people around me will get really upset. And to those people, I have this to say to you, okay? I don't know how to help you. I legitimately do not know how to. But communicate,
Alex, it's your
be
time.
there. Communicate, be there. If you're with us, communicate with us. We'll do whatever we can. Because seasonal depression, whatever it's called, is an alien concept to people still. It's not seen as a normal depressive thing. It's not connected in our heads to be like, we can only get sad at this time. It's not a common thing as depression normally is. But if you can knock on the door to ask for help, to ask for friendship, to ask for support, I hope that you have the friends around you. But also, email us as well at SillyWellsPod. We love you, I think. And we will now take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. We're in the wind. See ya.
Yeah. See ya.